Okay, so when you are figuring out what your X and Y are, you can take it from the equation. So what changes is the number of hours someone rents that kayak for. So X is the number of hours, and then Y would stand for what? Nope, we're not gonna have two factors in here. The total fee, okay? So Y is the total cost. To rent these kayaks. Okay, so it says now let's find the slope and the y-intercept. So if you look at these, it's important to pay attention to what the graph goes by. So notice how a 2 is right here. So that means that a 1 is right here. And then what does this go up by? If the fifth line is 50, this went up by 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So sometimes you just need to pay attention to your graph. So the slope, okay, is the rise over run. So let's find 2 points. Could you do this point and this point? So it went up what? 1. But it went up 1, but how many is that really? 10. So it went up 10 and over. It technically over and only went over 1. And it's really tricky when they're different units. Okay, so the slope is 10 over 1 or 10. And that's why it says be careful. So what do you think the slope means? Like, why would the cost keep going up? The longer what? The longer that you rent the kayak. Okay, so what do you think that slope stands for? If the slope is 10 and it goes up 10 every time, ooh, $10 an hour. Okay, so in this case, the slope represents, interpret the meaning of the slope. It represents the hourly cost of renting the kayak. Sorry. Okay, the next question is what is the y-intercept? Next one. 30. And that one was kind of obvious, right? Does anyone want to take a guess at what does 30 mean?
Like the fee just to rent the kayak.
Yes. The rental fee. Okay, and I'm gonna just put this in parentheses before, like before renting or before the hours. Okay, so that's why at 0 hours it starts at 30. The other thing that I think is really helpful when you have a graph, label what these axes mean. So like the X is hours. So it's useful to put hours here, and then this is total cost. So if you have the graph in front of you, go ahead and throw those labels on there because it is helpful. Okay. So the linear equation that models the scenario is, so remember we have our y equals mx plus b. That's going to be our slope intercept form. Well, we just picked out the slope and the intercept. So our slope is 10 and our intercept is 30. So we can write this 10x plus 30. So then it says, in general, linear equations that apply to real world scenarios will have the form shown below. Phi, or the starting value, and then m is the rate of change. M is also your slope, remember. And you guys could write that on here too if you want, that this is your slope and this is your y-intercept. So those two things kind of help you remember. So it says now that we have the equation y equals 10x plus 30, we can use it to solve the problems below. How much would it cost to rent a kayak for 5 hours? Well, remember that x is 5, or x is the number of hours. So if our base equation is this, where am I going to put 5 in? Yeah, so you're going to put 5 in for x. So this would be 10 times 5 plus 30. So 10 times 5 is 50, plus 30 is 80. So what this is saying is that the total cost is going to be $80 if you rented that kayak for 5 hours. Now it wants to know, does the graph agree? So let's go up and look. So for 5 would be right here. Does it hit 80? And it does. So then we can say, yes, our graph does agree. Okay, now this one is kind of the opposite. It says Sally paid $150. How long did she use the kayak? So does it give you X or Y? Pardon? It gives you Y in this case. So I have Y equals 10X plus 30 is my original, but I'm going to put 150 in for the total cost. I am looking for X now. So what do? We subtract the 30 first. We kind of take off that starting fee. That would give us 120. And then divide by 10. 120 divided by 10 is 12. What is it? 12 hours. Pardon? Okay. The graph to the right models the scenario below. Morgan worked a summer job. She saved her money during the summer. During the school year, or the school year is starting, and she plans on spending the same amount each month. So let's look at what happens in this graph. We start up here and we go down. Now just why does it go down? She's spending money, so it's a negative slope, okay? So first, X and Y, they just want, what does X and Y stand for? X is months, yep, so the number of months. And Y is, what is the Y-intercept? So this would be months. Yep. So this, you could say like the amount of money or her savings. I'm just going to say amount in savings. Okay, so then we need to find our slope, talk about its meaning, find the y-intercept and talk about its meaning. So if I were finding slope, remember just like before, we still look for like nice points. So I look here and here maybe, and then the y-intercept is here. Okay, so what do these go by? Looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What about the 200s? So 200, 400, 600, 800, 1,000. Looks good to me. Okay, so if I went down 3, how many did it really go down by? Minus 600. Good. And if I went over 2, what does it really go over by? 2. Yep. So the slope is negative 600 over 2, but that reduces to negative 300. Okay. So what does that mean? If it goes down 300 every month, yep. Yep. So Morgan spends $300 each month. Okay. Where is our y-intercept? 2,000. What does that mean?
Which one she started?
Yes, okay. She started with, Morgan started with $2,000. Okay, so then our equation is y equals our slope. Make sure it's a negative 300 plus 2,000. I know a lot of times you might visualize this 2,000 minus 300x, but to keep this in linear form, that's what we're going to do. Okay. Any questions on that one? Okay, the next one, it says the graph to the right models the scenario below. To start his lawn mowing business, James had to first buy a riding lawnmower. Once he bought it, he started earning a consistent amount of money each week. Why does this graph start down below the axis? Pardon? Well, he will gain money, but why? I heard it. He bought it, right? So he starts off, and like when you start a business, you start off owing money, okay? Unless you had saved. So maybe James could have saved and then bought the lawnmower, but he didn't. So what is our X? Our X stands for what? Number of weeks, because each week, so this is a number of weeks. And then the Y, what does the Y stand for? Yep. And it isn't like necessarily, this is basically just like the money he has, okay? Money James has. Okay, so the slope on this one, let's find, here's our y-intercept. Find some nice points. Okay, so what does this one go by every time? It goes, just goes over by ones, right? And then this went up 200 though, right? 200 by 1. So our slope is positive 200 over 1, which means what?
Well, wouldn't it be 400?
Oh, it goes up by each one is 200. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, you're right. Thanks, Leah. Okay, it goes up 400 because each chunk is 200. So what does that mean? James earns $400 per month, or no, per week. Sorry. What is our y-intercept? Negative 1,200, right? Well, what does that mean? That was the cost of the lawnmower, right? You could say something like that, or he started $12,000 or $1,200 in debt. You could say something like that. Y equals, our slope is 400x, and our intercept is minus 1,200. Okay, so far so good? Okay. So the value of Sarah's car is decreasing by a consistent amount. The value of her car can be modeled by this. What is the x-intercept in its meaning? What is the slope in its meaning? So here you're just given the equation and you guys kind of have to pick it apart, okay? So what is the y-intercept? Now, this graph is not written how we write this equation is not written how we write it. So we could rewrite this. It'd be negative 1,500x plus 18,000. So what does our y-intercept stand for? Our y-intercept is 18,000, right? What does it mean?
Would be like the Starting like price of like what she can buy for.
Yeah, what were you gonna say, Austin? The total price of her car. So she bought a car, okay?
1,500 be like the payments on it?
That's how much, in this case, it's decreasing by a consistent, so like it's called depreciation. Have you ever heard that word before? Yep. So hold on, I'm just gonna finish the sentence. The Y-intercept is 18,000 and it's the initial cost or value of the car. So depreciation is actually an interesting thing to think about. Depreciation means how much something decreases every day, month, year, because basically they think, especially with cars, that as soon as you leave the car sales lot, that it depreciates. If you put 1 mile on that car, it's not worth as much as 0 miles on that car. Okay. Now, there are some places where things appreciate. That means the value goes up. So can you think of a car that would appreciate in value?
Like an old car?
Like how old? What were you gonna say? Like a classic muscle car, okay? That's where a car, it probably decreased in value until all of a sudden it's cool to have an old car again, okay? And that's where it's kind of neat. But they actually say that a new car is like the worst thing to spend your money on because of how much value it loses the moment you drive it off the car lot. Okay, so you could buy a brand new car and then you could turn around and try to sell it the next day and you'll never get what you paid for. So it's kind of an interesting thing to think about. But some people just like new cars. Okay, so then they say, what is the slope and its meaning? So we kind of talked about this. Jason, you suggested that the slope was what you paid for it, okay? But we're talking about how much value the car has.
Payments.
Yes, so if you were thinking about it as far as like she took out a loan and this represented the loan, you would be 100% correct. This is just talking about the value of the car. So it was worth 18,000, but after a year, it's only worth, $1,500 less, and it's going to keep on going down. Okay, so the slope in this case is the amount of value the car decreases each year. Okay, so one thing to pick out here is, sometimes in the beginning of the problem, what is our X, what is our Y? So what is X in this case? Well, we're talking about time in years. So X is the years and the Y is the value of the car. So I really like to pick out these things when I start the problem, because then when I get a question, how long will it take for the value to be 7,500? Is the 7,500 your X or your Y? Your Y. Then look at your other question. What will the car be worth in 11 years? Is 11 your X or your Y? Your X. So if we have an equation, and you can use either equation, it does not matter. I'm just using the one that I flipped around. We know that $7,500 is going to be inserted for our Y. So 7,500 equals, and the reason I have no problem flipping it around is because we get to use calculators, so it doesn't really hurt us at all. Okay, if I'm going to solve this, first thing I have to do is what? Subtract that 18,000. This is why we do all that practice with solving equations before we get to chapter 5. So 7,500 minus 18,000, negative 10,500. And maybe you guys are like, ooh, we shouldn't have a negative number, but I'm going to divide by a negative. And I'll divide by that negative 1,500. and I get 7. Okay, the other thing that this is helpful for is I know that X stands for years. So now I know what to label my answer, 7 years. So in 7 years, the car will only be worth $7,500. Okay. So now the other side of this question says, what will the car be worth in 11 years? So that means that we're going to put 11 in for X. So we're going to have Y equals negative 1,500 times 11 plus 18,000. You can type that in one big equation if you'd like. You see how I did that? I don't know if you can see that very well. And it looks like I get 1,500. So in 11 years, that car will only be worth $1,500. Okay. The next one, it says the cost of renting a jet ski for a certain number of hours can be modeled by Y equals 40X plus 50. Okay, this is very similar to the kayak one, where X is going to be the number of hours that we rent that jet ski, and then Y is going to be the total cost of renting the jet ski. This way, if you had something like this, if you had a budget, you could say like, oh, we can only spend $500 on jet ski rentals. So you put 500 in here and you would solve for X. You figure out how many hours, okay? So this one says, how much does it cost per hour? Well, 40 is what's being multiplied by X. So 40 is the per hour cost. Well, what is the fee to rent them? $50. Yep, we have to pay $50 just to rent the jet skis. It's probably maybe like their insurance policy, something like this, and then you pay $40 per hour afterwards. Okay. So how much would it cost to rent for 3 hours? What do you guys think I'm going to do with the 3? Pardon? Yep, you're going to put it into the equation for X. So Y equals 40 times 3 plus 50. This would give me 120 plus 50, which gives you a total of 170. Then the other says how many hours. So now I'm looking for X, and I'm going to put the 290 in for the total cost. X is my unknown, that's hours. Okay. And subtract 50 from both sides. This gives you 240 equals 40X. Divide both sides by 40, and you get 6. 6 what? X stands for hours, so it is 6 hours. Okay, our last question here, they do not give you the equation. Okay, it says to get into the carnival costs $5, each ride is $225. Use a linear equation to solve the following. So who thinks that they could give me an equation? Max, Jenna, anyone else? Oh, don't raise your hand. Connor can, Amber can, Jason can, Hallie. Okay, so who's willing to give it to me? I need someone who hasn't participated lately. Okay, Connor, will you help me out? What's your equation that you can think of? Yep, 2.25x plus 5. Can you tell me why you put the 2.25 with the x? Yeah, so X stands for, so Broden, what does X stand for then? Pardon?
Or each ride.
Each ride, good. Most of the time it does stand for time, but in this case, X is the number of rides. And then Hallie, what does Y stand for then? Well, not, we pay $5 to get in.
Is it the total amount?
The total cost of going to that carnival. That includes the entry fee and how many rides we go on. So the total cost change. Okay, so Jason might go and he might ride 10 rides and his cost might be different than Amara if she goes and she rides 8 rides, okay? Okay, so it says if you bought $35, how many rides can you go? If you brought 35, how many rides can you go on? So the 35 would have to go in for what number? Y, yep. So 35 equals 2.25x plus 5. Okay, Ariana, what am I gonna do to try to get x by itself? Pardon? Not divide first. Okay. Okay, Jason, yep, you're gonna subtract 5 first. Gotta get working on that x by itself. So this is 30 equals 2.25x. You guys shouldn't be scared of decimals because Mason, what tool do we have to use? Yeah. So do you have a calculator over there? No? Man. Okay, so if you take and you try to get x by itself, you can divide both sides by 2.25. So 30 divided by 2.25 is 13.33. Okay, so if it comes out funny, can I ride 13.3 rides? No, just 13, okay? So you're just gonna have a little bit of change left over. So 13 rides would be your answer. Okay, so then it says, how much would it cost altogether to ride 7 rides? Macy, what do you think we're gonna do? Put 7 in for X, good job. Okay, so 2.25 times 7 gives us 15.75, and then plus 5 would give us $20.75. Okay, lots of notes together.